Welcome to the Standing in the Gaps News Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Our hearts go out to everyone affected by these terrible fires ripping through Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
We're here to give you a clear picture of what's happening.
Yeah.
So we're sifting through reports, social media, even some pretty heated commentary.
Yeah.
Trying to bring you those most important takeaways.
It's a truly devastating situation.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be diving into the hard facts,
Yeah.
the emergency response,
Right.
and even some of the more controversial viewpoints
Mm-hmm.
that are emerging.
Okay, so first, let's try to grasp the sheer scale of this disaster.
Right.
We're now 3 days in,
Yeah.
and the images coming out of LA are just heartbreaking.
It's hard to even fathom.
What can you tell us about the extent of the damage?
Well, we're looking at a massive evacuation order
Right.
with over 180,000 people forced to flee their homes.
Wow.
Entire neighborhoods have been reduced to ash.
It's hard to even fathom the impact this is having on people's lives.
Yeah.
The speed at which these fires are spreading is terrifying.
Right.
I saw a time lapse of the Palisades fire, and it was just incredible
Yeah.
how quickly it moved.
Well, that's partly due to the Santa Ana winds,
Yeah.
which are like a fire's worst nightmare. They act like a giant bellows pushing the flames across the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
It's this combination of, the weather and the terrain that makes these fires so difficult to contain.
Right.
And right now, both the Palisades and Hearst fires are still burning out of control.
Even some very well-known celebrities have been caught up in this, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Homes belonging to, Jennifer Aniston, Rihanna,
Right.
Adam Sandler, and others have been evacuated.
Mm-hmm.
There are even reports that Anthony Hopkins lost his mansion in the fires.
It's just devastating to think about what these families must be going through.
Yeah.
And I understand there have been fatalities.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
The LA Sheriff's Department has confirmed fatalities. And they're expecting that number to rise
Yeah.
as the situation becomes clearer. It's
Yeah.
a grim reality of these disasters.
If you're just joining us, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis like this.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask about something that seems to have added to the chaos.
Right.
This accidental citywide evacuation alert.
Yeah.
What happened there?
It seems like a technical error
Okay.
led to every single smartphone in LA County receiving an evacuation alert for a fire in one specific area.
Oh, wow.
That's millions of people getting an incredibly alarming message unnecessarily.
Pretty major blunder in the middle of an already chaotic situation.
Yeah.
Do you think this points to larger issues with how we handle emergency alerts? Especially with so many people relying on their smartphones for information.
It definitely raises some serious questions.
Yeah.
We're becoming increasingly dependent on these digital systems.
Right.
And this incident highlights just how fragile they can be, especially in a crisis. Right.
When reliable communication is absolutely vital.
And then there's the issue of looting in the evacuated areas.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that people would exploit a tragedy like this.
It is, but unfortunately, it's a reality we often see in these situations.
Right.
People take advantage of the chaos, target abandoned homes.
Yeah.
However, LA officials are cracking down hard,
Good.
with at least 20 arrests for looting already.
Wow.
They've issued very strong warnings
Okay.
and are promising to prosecute these crimes to the fullest extent of the law.
It's just disheartening to see people exploiting a tragedy like this for their own gain.
It is.
What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
Now, we also came across some pretty strong opinions about the fires and how the government is handling things.
Yeah.
One source claims that these fires are deliberate acts of arson,
Right.
even pointing to videos circulating online as proof.
It's important to approach those claims with caution.
While these videos do exist, there's been no official confirmation
Right.
from authorities
Right.
that arson is a factor in these fires.
This source also had some very strong opinions about the response from California's leadership,
Yeah.
specifically Mayor Karen Bass and Governor Gavin Newsom.
Right.
They were particularly critical of Bass's absence during the initial stages of the fires,
Yeah.
even scrutinizing her past political affiliations.
They also targeted Governor Newsom's handling of the situation, going so far as to suggest that former President Trump had called for Newsom's resignation.
Huh.
This commentary seems to be weaving the fires into a larger political narrative,
Yeah.
using the disaster to fuel existing political divisions.
It definitely feels like this source is trying to connect their critiques to a broader political agenda.
Yeah.
What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how these events become politicized so quickly, isn't it? It feels like we're seeing that play out here with people trying to fit these fires into their existing, political narratives.
It definitely feels that way, and the source we've been discussing really dives deep into that, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
They seem particularly focused on Mayor Bass.
Yeah, they are. They bring up her trip to Ghana
Right.
during the early stages of the fires,
Mm-hmm.
painting it as, a sign of misplaced priorities and a lack of leadership.
Right.
Their argument is that she should have been in L.A.
Right.
directly overseeing the response.
But I've also seen people defending her, right?
Right.
Saying that she was still actively engaged, even from afar.
Exactly. Her supporters argue that she was in constant contact with city officials and was actively involved in decision-making, even while on this pre-planned diplomatic trip.
Right.
They emphasize the importance of her international work.
It raises a fascinating question, though, doesn't it?
It does.
About the role of a leader during a crisis like this.
Yeah.
Is physical presence always essential? Or is it possible to lead effectively from a distance? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah.
Leave a comment and let us know.
It's a complex issue for sure, and it's not just Mayor Bass facing scrutiny.
Right.
Governor Newsom is also getting hit with criticism for his handling of the situation.
What are people saying about him?
Well, his detractors point to California's history with wildfires, arguing that his administration hasn't done enough to prevent or mitigate these disasters.
Yeah.
They highlight things like forest management practices,
Right.
infrastructure investment, emergency preparedness, saying that a lack of focus on these areas has made the state more vulnerable.
But I imagine his supporters have a different perspective.
They do. They defend his record, pointing to the significant investments the state has made in firefighting resources.
Right.
They also emphasize the challenges of managing wildfires in a climate that's becoming increasingly unpredictable.
So we're seeing these two very distinct narratives emerge, each side interpreting the situation through their own political lens. It's important to be aware of that, isn't it?
It is.
To recognize the potential for bias when we're consuming information, especially during a crisis like this.
Absolutely. And speaking of bias, this source we've been discussing also throws out a pretty explosive claim.
Okay.
They allege that former President Trump has called for Governor Newsom's resignation.
Wow. But is there any actual evidence to support that?
That's the thing. We haven't been able to independently verify that claim.
Okay.
And that's crucial, right? Especially during a crisis when misinformation can spread like wildfire itself.
Right.
We need to be careful about relying on credible sources.
Yeah.
And avoid amplifying unconfirmed information.
Good point. It's so easy to get caught up in the swirl of rumors and speculation.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the cause of these fires,
Right.
I know this source also promotes the idea that they were started deliberately, even going as far as to say they're not natural disasters at all.
Right. They're pushing this theory that the fires are the result of arson.
Okay.
Pointing to videos online as evidence, they highlight instances of fires starting near dumpsters or power lines, suggesting intentional ignition.
But couldn't those fires have started accidentally? I mean, things like electrical malfunctions or discarded cigarettes can easily spark a fire.
Exactly. There are many possible explanations, and it's important to consider those before jumping to conclusions.
This source also pulls in social media posts from people claiming to have witnessed arson firsthand, including what they say is a tweet from actor Henry Winkler alleging that he saw people starting fires. What are your thoughts on using social media as evidence in a case like this?
Well, social media can be a powerful tool for sharing information, but it's also incredibly susceptible to rumors and unverified claims. We need to remember that anyone can post anything online,
Right.
and it's often difficult to determine the credibility of these sources.
Right.
It's crucial to corroborate information from social media with official sources before taking it at face value.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword then.
Yeah.
Potentially valuable information, but also a breeding ground for misinformation.
Right.
And this source seems to be using it to support their broader narrative, which is that these fires are a symptom of California's decline under Democratic leadership. They even go as far as to blame what they call woke policies and DEI incompetence for the state's vulnerability to these disasters.
Right. They're connecting the fires to this larger ideological agenda, trying to paint them as a consequence of progressive policies.
Right.
It's a tactic we see often in political discourse.
And they seem particularly focused on Mayor Bass, again, highlighting her past involvement with leftist groups and her travels to Cuba. They use this to paint her as a radical ideologue who's unfit to lead L.A.
It's important to remember that past associations and political beliefs don't necessarily dictate someone's current actions or intentions. It's fair to scrutinize a leader's record, but it's crucial to do so fairly and avoid making unfounded connections or assumptions.
That's a good point. It's easy to fall into the trap of confirmation bias, seeking out information that reinforces our existing beliefs.
Right.
We need to challenge ourselves to consider different perspectives, even if they make us uncomfortable. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.
I agree, and it's also worth noting that this source contrasts Bass's perceived inaction with former President Trump's vocal criticism of Governor Newsom.
Right.
They even highlight Trump's alleged call for Newsom's resignation as an example of strong leadership.
Again, though, we have to remember that this source clearly aligns with Trump's ideology, so their presentation of information is likely filtered through that lens.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder to always consider the source and their potential biases.
Now, this source goes even further, talking about what they call the destruction of California's society. They blame the state's progressive policies for creating a culture of low trust, loneliness, and vagrancy. They even suggest that these factors have somehow contributed to the fires.
That's a pretty sweeping generalization, and it's not really backed up by any concrete evidence. While California, like any state, faces its share of social challenges, attributing the cause of complex events like wildfires to such broad societal factors is overly simplistic.
This source also criticizes the media's coverage of the fires, saying that journalists are focusing on superficial aspects like appearance instead of the real issues. They even give an example of a news anchor adjusting his raincoat during a live broadcast as evidence of this misplaced emphasis.
It's certainly valid to critique media coverage and hold journalists to high standards, but it's also important to avoid cherry-picking isolated incidents to paint a distorted picture, and focusing on someone's appearance during a crisis seems pretty irrelevant, don't you think?
I agree. It feels like an attempt to discredit the media by focusing on trivial details rather than engaging with the substance of their reporting. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below.
This source then wraps up their argument by saying that these fires are a sign of the impending downfall of what they call the woke ideology. They claim that the American public is rejecting progressive policies and that this will lead to a major political shift.
That's a pretty bold prediction, and it seems to be rooted more in ideology than actual evidence. While political and social attitudes are constantly evolving, it's impossible to say with certainty what the future holds.
Right. We can analyze trends and make educated guesses, but ultimately, the future is unpredictable.
It's fascinating how these fires have become a focal point for so many different opinions and debates. It really highlights the deep divisions in our society and the challenges of having constructive conversations about complex issues.
It does, and I think it underscores the importance of critical thinking, media literacy, and being aware of our own biases as we try to make sense of these events.
Well said. If you're finding this deep dive insightful, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis like this. It's been a really thought-provoking discussion so far. We've covered the immediate impact of the fires,
right,
the emergency response, and even delved into some of the politically charged narratives that are circulating. Now I think it's time to shift our focus to the long-term implications of this disaster.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that lie ahead for these communities?
The rebuilding process is going to be monumental.
Right.
We're talking about, thousands of homes and businesses reduced to ashes.
Yeah.
Not to mention critical infrastructure and public spaces that need to be restored. It's hard to even grasp the financial costs involved.
Right.
Let alone the logistical challenges of such a massive rebuilding effort.
Yeah.
It's going to take years, if not decades, for these communities to fully recover.
And it's not just about rebuilding the physical structures. There's also the emotional and psychological toll on the people who have been through this incredibly traumatic experience.
Absolutely. The trauma of losing your home, your possessions, your sense of security, that can have a profound and lasting impact on individuals and families. Providing mental health support and fostering a sense of community will be essential for healing and recovery.
These fires also raise some really important questions about California's future, don't they?
They do.
Specifically, its vulnerability to these kinds of disasters.
Yeah, and I think climate change is a major factor here. We're seeing hotter temperatures,
right,
drier conditions, longer fire seasons, all of which contribute to the increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires.
So this isn't just a one-off event. It's a trend we're likely to see continue, if not worsen, in the years to come.
I think that's a safe assumption.
Yeah.
And it means that California needs to adapt.
Right.
We need to rethink our approach to fire prevention and mitigation.
Okay.
That includes things like investing in fire-resistant building materials, creating defensible spaces around homes, improving early warning systems, and reevaluating how we manage our forests.
This idea of adapting to a changing climate seems particularly relevant given that the smoke from these fires has spread far beyond California, affecting air quality in other states and even countries.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that these environmental challenges don't respect borders, and they require a collective response.
It's a global issue that demands global cooperation. And that brings us to another crucial point, the importance of community resilience throughout this disaster. We've seen neighbors helping neighbors, volunteers stepping up to provide aid, communities rallying together to support those who've lost everything.
Right.
That spirit of solidarity and mutual support is going to be absolutely essential for navigating the long road to recovery.
It's inspiring to see those acts of kindness amidst such devastation.
Oh.
So, stepping back a bit, what are some of the key lessons we can learn from this experience? What can we take away from this to better prepare for future challenges?
One of the biggest takeaways for me is the importance of preparedness, both on an individual and a community level.
Yeah.
We need to be proactive, not reactive.
Right.
That means having evacuation plans in place, putting together emergency kits, knowing where to get reliable information during a crisis. It also means taking steps to mitigate risks, like creating defensible spaces around our homes and being mindful of fire safety practices.
Yeah, we've talked about the role of communication, haven't we? Especially during a crisis when reliable information is so vital.
Absolutely. We need to ensure that our emergency alert systems are robust and reliable, and that people have access to trusted sources of information.
And finally, I think these fires have really underscored the power of human compassion and resilience. Even in the face of such immense loss, we've seen incredible acts of kindness, courage, and a determination to rebuild that spirit is what will ultimately see these communities through this difficult time.
I couldn't agree more. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the immediate impact of the fires, the complexities of the emergency response, the politically charged narratives that are circulating, and the long-term challenges that lie ahead. But most importantly, we've seen the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity.
It's been a truly insightful discussion. And I think it highlights the importance of staying informed, engaging in critical thinking, and being prepared for the unexpected.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you found this deep dive informative and thought-provoking. If you did, please show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing to our channel, and sharing this episode with your friends.
And don't forget, we're still raising funds through our GoFundMe campaign to help us improve the quality of our content and reach a wider audience. Your contributions are what make this work possible, and they allow us to invest in better equipment like webcams, studio microphones, and editing computers so we can keep bringing you these in-depth analyses.
Every little bit helps, and we're incredibly grateful for your support. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected. We'll see you on our next deep dive.